The footage starts in black. Then a wash of pale green floods the screen, the world rendered in the strange, flat glow of an infrared camera mounted to a fence post somewhere in the Texas Hill Country. The timestamp in the corner reads 2:14 in the morning. For 11 seconds, nothing moves. Just the low brush, the faint shimmer of cooling soil, the dark mound of a freshly dug nest where a sow has buried her litter for the night. Then, at the edge of the frame, something enters that has no business doing what it is about to do. When the researchers first played this clip, the room did not go quiet because of what they saw. A lot of people have watched a predator move through the dark. The room went quiet because of what it meant. For 2 decades, every scientist, every rancher, every agency in the state had agreed on one thing. They believed they understood the ending of this story. They believed the war was already lost. Here is what they thought they knew. Feral hogs had conquered Texas. Not slowly, not partially, completely. 2.6 million of them, spread across 253 of the state's 254 counties, breeding faster than any bullet, any trap, any helicopter could ever hope to keep up with. The damage ran past $500 million a year. The federal government had spent over $100 million on control in a single decade, and the population had only climbed. That was the narrative. The hogs had won. There was nothing left out there capable of pushing back. It was wrong. And the thing entering that frame at 2:14 in the morning was about to prove it. But to understand why 30 seconds of grainy night vision footage rewrote everything biologists thought they knew, you have to understand how this animal came to own a continent in the first place. Because the feral hog is not a Texas creature, it is not an American creature. It is a mistake that took 500 years to fully detonate. Roll the clock back to the early 1500s. Spanish explorers landing along the Gulf Coast brought something with them that seemed, at the time, like simple common sense. Pigs. Domestic pigs, herded off the ships and turned loose near their camps. The idea was elegant. A living food reserve. Let the animals fatten themselves on the land, then return on the next expedition and harvest a ready supply of meat. No salting, no barrels, no spoilage. Just walk back, and dinner would be waiting. The pigs had other plans. They drifted into the forests. They rooted. They bred. They vanished into a wilderness that had never seen anything like them. And when the explorers came back, the food reserve was gone, scattered into the timber, already turning wild. Within a few generations, those soft barnyard animals had grown lean and bristled and mean. The first feral hogs in North America were not bred to survive. They simply refused to die. For centuries, that was the whole story. Scattered populations of half-wild pigs, a nuisance, nothing more. Then, in the early 1900s, the second mistake arrived, and this one was deliberate. Wealthy Europeans, hungry for big game to hunt on this side of the ocean, imported the Eurasian wild boar. Not the soft descendants of farm stock, the real thing. An animal forged by the harsh mountains and forests of the old world. Built lean and aggressive and almost impossible to kill. They penned these boar inside private hunting preserves. Fenced enclosures, meant to keep the trophies in and the trouble out. Fences do not hold an animal like that for long. The boar got out. They always get out. And when they did, they slipped into the wild and found the feral domestic pigs already roaming the south. And the two bloodlines met. And something new came out the other side. Here is the part that should stop you. The hybrid was worse than either parent. Stronger than the farm pig, smarter than the wild boar, more adaptable than anything that had come before it. It carried the size and fertility of the domestic line, and the cunning and toughness of the Eurasian one, and it spread across the landscape like a stain. Biologists today will tell you, with no exaggeration, that this hybrid is arguably the most destructive land animal the continent has ever produced. Not because it is the biggest, not because it is the deadliest. Because it is the most impossible to stop. And the reason it is impossible comes down to a math problem. A single sow can produce 2 litters in 1 year. Each litter can run up to a dozen piglets. Do that math forward and the numbers become a nightmare. Under the right conditions, a feral hog population can double in under 5 months. 5 months. You can clear a piece of land in the spring and watch it fill back in by autumn. There is no version of containment that survives contact with arithmetic like that. You are not fighting an animal. You are fighting compound interest with legs. By the time anyone took the threat seriously, the occupation was nearly complete. The U.S. Department of Agriculture puts the nationwide population at roughly 6.9 million feral hogs. Texas alone holds about 2.6 million of them. They have reached 253 of the state's 254 counties, and the only holdout, El Paso County, out in the far western corner, is not safe. It is simply next. Wildlife officials know exactly how fast it can fall. One trailer full of trapped hogs, dumped illegally onto fresh land, is enough to seed an entirely new county. That is all it takes. One load. The people who study this for a living have stopped calling it a wildlife problem. They call it an occupation. An invasion measured not in acres but in territory held. And the soldiers in this occupation are built for it. A feral hog can sprint up to 30 miles per hour, fast enough to run down a person before they reach a door. It can clear a fence 40 inches high without breaking stride. Its tusks grow past 6 inches, curved and sharpened by constant grinding into weapons that can open a hunting dog from chest to flank in a single swing. And under that bristled hide sits a layer of skin more than 1 inch thick, backed across the shoulders by a plate of dense cartilage the hunters call the shield. Light ammunition does not punch through it. It dimples. It glances off. You can hit a boar square and watch it turn and look at you, unbothered, calculating, before it decides whether you are worth its time. Because that is the other thing nobody warns you about. These animals do not just survive you, they study you. There is a biologist who has spent years watching how feral hogs respond to pressure, and she frames it in a way that stays with you long after you hear it. A missed shot, she explains, is not a missed shot. It is a lesson. When a hunter fires and misses, the hog does not simply run. It records. It logs your scent on the wind. It maps the direction the sound came from. It files away the exact place where danger arrived, the time of night, the angle of approach. And then it teaches that lesson to the others. A spooked hog will avoid that spot for roughly a year. An entire sounder will reroute its nightly movements around a single bad memory. The way she puts it is blunt and unsettling. You do not hunt them. They hunt you back. You think you are the predator setting the terms, but every encounter is a data point the hog walks away with. And you walk away with nothing but a wasted round and a population that just got smarter. And while they were learning you, they were tearing the ground out from under everything you built. Picture a military airfield in central Texas just before dawn. The runway lights burning in the gray. A pilot in the cockpit running through a pre-flight checklist. And then movement at the edge of the tarmac, dark shapes pouring out of the tree line, dozens of them. A sounder of hogs flowing across the runway like water finding a low spot. Takeoffs were canceled. Multi-million-dollar aircraft held on the ground because nobody could guarantee the strip was clear of 200-pound animals that do not understand what a runway is or care that they are standing on one. That happened. Not in some remote frontier outpost. On an active installation in a state that prides itself on control. Move east into the suburbs around Irving, and the damage wears a different face. Manicured golf courses churned overnight into something that looks shelled. Fairways rooted up in long, muddy trenches where a sounder spent the dark hours digging for grubs and roots. Private lawns destroyed. And underground, where nobody thinks to look, buried fiber optic lines chewed and severed because a hog rooting for food does not know the difference between a tuber and a cable. Whole neighborhoods knocked offline by animals that nobody ever saw. But the people who feel it deepest are the farmers. And their losses are not measured in inconvenience. They are measured in a year's work, erased in a single night. In Williamson County, one farmer walked out to his field at first light and found 24 acres of corn flattened, not eaten neatly, trampled, rooted, ruined. About $40,000 of crop, gone between sundown and sunrise. He did not lose a portion of his margin. He lost the season. And there is a particular kind of helplessness in that. Standing at the edge of a ruined field, knowing the animals that did it are already a mile away, already digging into someone else's ground, already breeding the next generation that will come back and do it again. And then there is the cost that no insurance policy covers. Because for all the talk of crops and runways and fiber lines, these are still wild animals with 6-inch tusks and no fear left in them. In 2019 in Harris County, a woman was attacked outside her own home in the early morning hours. She did not survive. Let that sit for a second. Not a hunter deep in the brush, not someone who went looking for trouble, a person stepping outside her front door, cornered, threatened, or simply unlucky. A feral hog will charge, and when it does, the result can be catastrophic. This stopped being an agricultural story the day it became a fatality. It became a safety problem. It became the kind of thing that changes how a community feels about walking to its own mailbox before sunup. Stack all of it together, and the number climbs into the unthinkable. Texas alone loses more than $500 million a year to feral hog damage. Push the lens out to the whole country, and the annual figure reaches an estimated $3 billion. $3 billion every single year bled out into ruined crops and broken infrastructure and emergency control programs. And here is the part that should stop you cold. Decades of spending have not bent that curve downward, not flattened it, not slowed it. The money goes out, the hogs keep coming, and the line on the graph keeps climbing as if none of it ever happened. So, they reached for the obvious answer. The old playbook. The one every rancher in the South knew by heart. Trap them, shoot them, and if you cannot kill them all, push them off your land and on to the next property over. Cage traps baited with corn. Dog teams sent crashing through the brush at night. Professional removal crews hired at real expense to clear a property acre by acre. And for a little while, on any given piece of land, it would seem to work. The sounder would thin out. The fields would go quiet. The farmer would breathe. And then, within days, the survivors would come back, warier, harder to catch, carrying the memory of the trap that took their kin and passing it down to their piglets like an inheritance. The animals that learned would teach the animals that came after, and every breeding cycle acted as a biological reset button, wiping out whatever progress the traps and the dogs had made, and replacing it with a fresh, hungry, harder-to-fool generation. The math always won. It always came back to the math. So, they went bigger. If the ground game couldn't keep up, they would take the fight into the air. And on paper, the helicopter changed everything. A single flight team, a pilot and a gunner working in tandem, could sweep 400,000 acres in a matter of days. Picture that. Land you could not walk across in a week, covered in an afternoon. The rotor wash flattening the grass, while the gunner picks targets from above. They remove more hogs in a single morning flight than a ground crew could pull out of the brush in an entire month. The footage from those runs is brutal and efficient. Sounders scattering across an open field, the aircraft banking hard. The work done fast and from a distance no tusk could ever reach. For a moment, it felt like the answer. Finally, a tool that matched the scale of the problem. But here is the part that should stop you, because it is the same trap dressed in different clothes. The helicopter changed the scale. It never changed the outcome. You could pull 1,000 hogs out of a county in a weekend, and the population would simply reproduce faster than any team could fire. Remember the math. 2 litters a year, a dozen piglets each, a sow doubling her sounder before the spent shell casings had even rusted. The aircraft was loud, it was expensive, and it was, in the cold language of the data, treading water at $20,000 a flight. And then it got worse, because heavy pressure does not just fail to eliminate hogs, it scatters them. push a sounder hard enough, frighten it badly enough, and it does not simply die. It breaks apart and runs. Those escapees, panicked and dispersing in every direction, cross fence lines and county roads and riverbeds, and they colonize ground that was previously clean. A county with no hog problem at all wakes up one season later with a breeding population, because the aggressive push 2 counties over planted the seed. Think about what that means. Every hard, well-funded, well-intentioned control operation carried inside it the power to make the problem bigger somewhere else. You were not killing the invasion. In some cases, you were spreading it. And the bills kept arriving. A single coordinated helicopter operation could run $20,000 before a single hog hit the ground. The Federal Wildlife Services arm spent over $100 million on hog control across a single decade. $100 million. And through all of it, every flight, every trap, every dog team, every dollar, the population kept climbing. That is the wall they hit. Not a lack of effort, not a lack of money, a lack of any approach that could actually win. The smartest people in the field looked at the curve, looked at the spending, and quietly admitted what the numbers had been screaming all along. From the outside, this fight could not be won. So, that was the narrative. The invasion had arrived, it had spread, it had outbred every weapon aimed at it, and the people fighting it were losing ground every single year. That was the ending everyone had accepted. It was wrong, because somewhere out in the brush, something else had already started fighting this war, and nobody had noticed. It began, as these things do, with a small anomaly that did not fit. Starting around 2014, researchers working hog country began stumbling onto something strange. Hog nests, the shallow farrowing beds a sow scrapes out to birth and shelter her piglets, were dug up and emptied. Not raided in passing, but excavated. The soil was turned over, the bedding scattered, the litter simply gone. And here is what made it strange. These piglets had not been trapped. They had not been shot. No human had touched that ground. Something had come in the dark, physically pulled an entire litter out of a defended nest, and vanished, leaving nothing behind but disturbed earth and a scatter of small, evenly spaced tracks pressed into the dirt around the edges. So, the case opened. And very quickly, it became a crime scene. CSI, but wildlife. The researchers knelt over those nests the way a detective kneels over a body, reading what was left for what it could tell them. And the first question was the only question that mattered. What kills a litter of feral piglets inside a nest? A 200-pound sow is willing to die defending. Because, make no mistake, a mother hog is not an easy mark. She is fast, she is armored, she has tusks, and she will turn and gut anything that comes for her young. Whatever was doing this was walking up to one of the most dangerous mothers in North America and walking away with her entire litter. The tracks were the first clue, and at first they only deepened the mystery. They were too small, too neat, spaced in a tight, purposeful gate that ringed the nest like a perimeter. So, the team did what any good investigator does. They started building a suspect list, and they started crossing names off it one by one, because every obvious answer turned out to be wrong. A bear? It was the logical first thought. A black bear has the raw power to tear a nest apart and the appetite to empty it. But the tracks were all wrong. No broad pad, no deep claw furrows, none of the heavy, plodding sign a bear leaves behind. And in much of the country where these emptied nests were turning up, there were no resident bears at all. Cross it off. A mountain lion then. A big cat with the stealth to approach a sow and the strength to kill. But a lion does not excavate a nest and carry off a whole litter. A lion stalks and ambushes, takes a single animal, and drags it to cover to feed. The pattern was wrong, the prey count was wrong, and the tracks were nowhere close to a cat's round, clawless print. Cross it off too. Domestic dogs gone feral? Possible in theory, but the precision was wrong. Free-roaming dogs blunder and maul and leave chaos. What the researchers were reading in the dirt was not chaos. It was something careful, something that approached, struck, and withdrew with almost surgical economy. Every answer the team reached for came apart in their hands. And the tracks kept pointing at an animal that, on paper, had absolutely no business doing any of this. Because when they finally matched the print, when they laid the cast against the reference and watched the lines fall into place, the suspect that emerged was one nobody at the table wanted to say out loud, because it made no sense at all. The tracks belonged to a coyote. Sit with how absurd that sounded. A coyote weighs maybe 30 pounds, soaking wet. The sow it would have to get past weighs 200 pounds and is built like a battering ram with knives bolted to her face. On paper, that fight ends one way. The coyote loses. So the researchers did what skeptics do. They assume scavenging. A coyote will happily eat a piglet that is already dead. Maybe these litters died of cold, of disease, of a sow rolling onto them, and the coyotes simply cleaned up after. A tidy explanation. It let everyone keep their old picture of the world intact. And then the cameras started talking. Infrared trail footage out of Blanco County, Texas, captured the thing the tracks had only whispered. 2 in the morning, 3 coyotes moving across a clearing toward a nest, and they were not wandering. They were moving in formation. One animal led, easing in low and slow from downwind, keeping its scent pulled away from the sleeping sow. The other 2 peeled off to the sides and took up positions, one left, one right, like they'd done this 100 times, because they had. What the footage showed next is the part that should stop you. One coyote held back, watching the sow, ready to bolt the moment she woke. Another slipped to the edge of the nest and tested the air over the piglets, reading their scent, picking its moment. And then it happened all at once. A synchronized rush, a single bite to the neck, a vanishing back into the brush before the sow could fully get her feet under her. Start to finish, the whole sequence ran under 5 seconds. This was not scavenging. This was a coordinated hunt with assigned roles. A distractor, a flanker, a blocker. The researchers had a name for it almost before they had the words to believe it. High-risk micro-predation. You don't beat the mother. You outthink her. You distract, you flank, you strike, you disappear, and you let the most dangerous part of the equation sleep through the whole thing. Then the lab confirmed what the camera suggested. At Fort Hood, biologists examined 18 coyotes, and nearly a third of them had fresh feral piglet tissue still in their stomachs. Not old, not scavenged, fresh. Down in Georgia, researchers ran scat samples and found feral hog DNA in over 30% of them. 2 different states, 2 different teams. The same answer. This was not a fluke, not one clever pack, not a lucky night on a single ranch. This was systematic, multi-state predation that had been running quietly underneath everyone's feet the entire time. And here is where the whole story turns over. Every agency, every helicopter team, every trapper, every rancher, every dollar of the $100 million the federal program spent had been aimed at the adults. The big, armored, fence-clearing, runway-charging adults. That was the enemy everybody could see. But the coyotes ignored the adults completely. They weren't fighting the war the humans were fighting. They were hitting the population at the level no program ever touched. The generational level, the piglets, the next litter, and the one after that, and the one after that. They weren't trimming the hog population. They were reaching into its future and switching it off, one nest at a time, every single night. Now here's the finding. Nobody put in a press release. Between 2017 and 2020, states across the country paid bounties for dead coyotes, up to $75 a head in some places. The logic seems sound. Coyotes take livestock, coyotes take game, so fewer coyotes is better. And so, with public money and good intentions, people went out and killed the one animal that was actually winning. They were cutting the brake line on the single mechanism, holding the hog explosion in check. In one Texas county, when coyote numbers were knocked down by around 60%, the feral hog population tripled in 3 years. Tripled. The math was brutal and it was clear. Take away the coyote, and the hogs surge into the gap like water through a broken dam. That is the irony at the heart of all of it. For decades, the most destructive land animal this continent has ever produced was being held back. Not by bullets, not by traps, not by a single federal program, but by a 30-pound scavenger everyone wrote off as vermin. The animal we were paying to kill was the closest thing we had to a solution. And every coyote brought in for a bounty was, in a very real sense, a future field of corn lost, a future runway closed, a future sow and her dozen piglets set loose on a county that had been clean. Texas is starting to listen. The new approach does not lean on any single weapon. It blends smart traps that catch whole sounders at once, coordinated aerial sweeps, carefully managed targeted control, and, for the first time, deliberate protection of the coyote. Not because the coyote is gentle, not because it is a hero in the storybook sense, but because the land already had an answer, and we had spent 20 years and billions of dollars working against it without ever knowing. The hogs are still out there, 6.9 million of them, give or take, rooting through fields at this very moment, breeding faster than any rifle can fire. The invasion is still real. The damage is still counted in the hundreds of millions every year. Nobody is claiming this is over, but for the first time in 2 decades, the ending is no longer written. Out in the dark, at 2 in the morning, a pack moves in formation toward a nest. And a war nobody scheduled and nobody funded goes on without us. The land has started moving again. And the question is no longer just whether we can win. It is whether we are finally smart enough to get out of the way of the one thing already winning. So here is what I want from you. If your county, your state, your government handed you the budget tomorrow and asked you to decide, would you protect the coyote, the predator we have spent a century trying to wipe out, to control the hogs? Or does trusting a wild animal to fix a problem we created feel like a gamble you would never take? Drop your answer in the comments, tell me where you stand and why, and tell me this too. Who wins this thing in the end? The invader that breeds faster than we can count, or the home team that was here all along? Subscribe, because this story is still being written out there in the dark, and we are going to follow every twist of it.